Welcome back to the Black Letter Podcast. We set out to create an entertaining and exciting podcast about law and business. Black Letter, the name, comes from the Gothic typeset. Over time, Black Letter became the only font that English law books were printed in. It made it harder for kind of the common person to understand what the English law books said. Black Letter came to represent something that was law, that was set in stone, that was sort of old and a well-settled fundamental principle of law. We're here to demystify black letter law. We're here to demystify things that happen in business and law and where those two meet. And I hope you have fun listening. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Letter Podcast. We are live in the studio. We are living in a post-COVID world. I think this is my first in-studio podcast since before COVID. So great to be back. With me today, I've got Tracey Pilone, the CEO and founder of Element 84. Element 84 is a woman-owned business that does government contract work for NASA and for satellite companies, and it's just interesting. I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm going to let Tracey tell you about it. But first, Tracey, thanks for joining us on the show. Why don't you share with us a little bit about Tracey, your background, and how you came to be sitting here as the CEO of a massively successful satellite data company?
Well, I started my career in actually construction management. I graduated from Virginia Tech with a civil engineering degree and worked for the first 5 years of my career in construction, which I really enjoyed. One of the things that I really missed about that was it was a very tangible like work product, right? I can still go downtown and be like, I helped build that, which is the thing you don't get out of satellite data, but it's not quite the same.
You can look up in space and say, hey, I'm involved with space.
Yeah, it's not quite the same.
No, I guess not.
You could take pictures of the buildings that I worked on from space.
That's
so
pretty
I
cool.
guess that's like the,
there you go.
okay, there
There's
you go.
connection.
That's like the connection. Yeah. And we also, that was another thing that was cool about that was you get the ability to work with people from all walks of life every day on the same goal, which was really kind of a neat thing.
In engineering.
Yes,
in
construction. Like
yeah.
you had that, where you had a laborer or you had the multi-million-dollar, building owner. And everybody was together working on the same thing all the time. And there's not a lot of places in our society anymore where you get that.
Right, not satellite data.
No, not satellite data. You barely work with people in satellite data sometimes. So I was working on construction sites until I was 8 months pregnant. And then my boss got uncomfortable and was worried about my safety. So brought me into the office. And then it was kind of time for a pivot. So my intention was to look for something that was a little more kid-friendly. We were trying to balance the family. I think this is a common story. Dan's salary was significantly higher than mine. So there was math around like, okay, well, it makes sense to push his career, not mine. So I was going to be a math teacher. So I spent 2 years. I have a master's degree in education from the University of Virginia, which has never, it's been kind of used once.
Well, don't you use it every day?
Yeah, that's true.
To some degree, you have to have that kind of skill to talk to people and manage a company.
You do, that's true.
I imagine.
Indirectly. And it does also help with when we're particularly like designing trainings and stuff, there's a little bit in the back of your head.
You have a master's in education?
This is an adult learner. This is how you keep people engaged.
So Dan, just so our audience, I know who Dan is. Dan is Tracey's husband, but also a co-founder
right.
and co-executive at Element 84.
Yeah.
So just so we know.
That's true. Sorry about that.
He is the tech side of Element 84.
He is the software engineering side. So he came from a straight computer science software engineering. He's been on that trail his whole career. We were kind of working through the part-time freelancing thing. I ended up actually sort of randomly doing a friend of a favor and doing some part-time tech writing that ended up extending for years. And that turned into testing software and that turned into bug fixing software. So that was sort of how I
became a satellite data
world.
person. So how did you start the company? What was the hey, let's, and tell us about the name Element 84, because I think that's kind of cool.
Oh, the name is kind of cool. I will own the fact that starting this company was not my idea. I am a risk-averse person, and I will talk about that a little bit later. But I had enough sort of stable, freelancey kind of stuff that we could figure out a way to make it Dan's full-time job for a stretch of time.
Okay.
And that was our test run, and it turned out to, 13 years later, it's still going. So it was intended, the idea was it would be, just a couple of people. I'd pull in my software, my freelance stuff, and we'd have it under one umbrella. And then over time, it just kept growing. So the name of the company actually sort of comes from our last name. Element 84 is polonium on the periodic scale, periodic table of the elements. And it's our last name is Pilone. So it's not quite spelled the same. And Element 84 actually has a really cool history. Mary Curie found it and named it after Poland. So
It's just neat. It's like
fun.
it's a tech nerd's dream name because it checks so many boxes, right?
It
Personal
does, that's
connection, historical connection, science, periodic tables. You just
They
did
do even
amazing work
use
with that name.
Polonium gets used to power satellites too.
Oh, what?
Yeah, we
Oh my
totally
gosh.
did not know that.
You didn't know that?
No, we didn't know
That's
that.
fantastic that works.
It does work out.
I have no idea what polonium is. Now I do. I know it's something that powers satellites.
It's not nice stuff. It's also been used to
Don't
poison
eat it,
Russian
right?
spies, so don't.
Okay.
Yeah, don't
Right.
do that part
Okay.
either.
But put it in satellites. So,
Yeah.
so now, Tracey, what is it that you do? So you went from being a pregnant engineering person on construction jobs to a freelancer. How did you become the CEO from the kind of, you said, well, we brought in my freelance stuff and it was a test run and now it's 13 years later. And how many people are at Element 84?
Right now, actually, 84.
84 people. Oh my gosh.
Which is just
Not
dumb
intentional.
Luck. It moves a
Yeah,
lot.
it's dumb
but,
luck
yeah.
today that there happen to be 84 people at
yeah,
Element.
there's
Everyone's going to remember this.
There's 84. Well, when we started the business, we kind of divvied it up between I would handle the business functions, Dan was cutting code, and then I was still building as a technical writer. And as the company grew, I started doing project management stuff for our projects, and then we started bringing in, more and more help on the business side, and that's the part that I kept growing. So,
And Dan is still very technical.
yes, Dan is still very technical, and does more of our sales stuff than I do. So, I think. It's just one step at a time. It sounds weird, but all the business functions I could do personally and manage. And then as we kept growing, you have to add help to, help with this part or that part. Payroll's too big or accounting's too big, and you bring in help as you go.
And then it just grows.
And
you get another contract. So tell us background-wise a little bit about the contracts you have. I know some contracts with NASA. You have something with the French government. You have satellites from all over the...
Yeah.
Tell us about that a little bit. What you can tell us.
Yeah.
I know some stuff you can't tell us because...
We have a lot of confidentiality clauses.
Confidentiality stuff and ITAR and export laws and all that stuff.
Most of our work is in open science and open data. So for the government, the NASA, NOAA, USGS work, that's all satellites that are pointed at the Earth, and that data is available free for download for anyone, anywhere, including like everybody.
Even me.
Even you.
Yeah.
It's an extremely powerful multi-billion-dollar asset that our government has that I think is underutilized, and a lot of totally. It's very difficult data to work with, which is good for our business, but not necessarily good for like the world.
Right.
So a lot of our work is to take that free resource and deploy it in ways that people can use it to make decisions, like everything from where to put wells. We have customers who've done that, how to deal with water resources, how to manage forests and emergency response, and everything in between.
So you don't have to have the expertise in these specific fields, just in how to provide the data for them in an understandable format.
Yeah, a lot of our customers are the ones who have the expertise in the fields, and,
Gotcha.
And we're sort of trying to figure out how to help them.
So do you think, and I know this is an off-the-wall question, I just thought of it, but do you think that artificial intelligence is going to change, enhance, maybe...
That is so funny. I just had somebody ask me about that last week.
I mean, of course. You have to, especially when you say, hey, we're translating something complicated into data. The first thing that I think is there's this boom in AI, and it seems like it's a field that might be ripe for that.
We have a machine learning team, so
Okay.
we're
So you're
going
on top
down
of
that
it.
field.
You're on top
down
of
that road.
Yeah.
You have to one of the big things that people want to use satellite data for is change detection,
Okay.
and seeing what's happened over time, and that's like ripe for automation because you have
Right.
I mean,
because it's massive sets of data.
It's massive and it's repetitive,
Yeah.
and having a human in the loop is a thing that people do, but it's challenging to make that efficient, to say the least. I mean, in some cases, we've got data sets. The Landsat program goes back to the early 70s, so you've got like decades of data.
Of petabytes, I guess.
Yep,
Yeah.
petabytes of data, and it can be applied to all kinds of problems. And truthfully, I think it's being underapplied right now, and because there's a lot of groups that it's too impermeable to get to, and they've got their systems and they're going to stick with what they've done.
So we've done a little deep dive on the business a little bit here in your model. So we're going to come back in the next segment, and I'd like you to think about this, Tracey, for our guests, because they're going to hear this part about the background, about what Element 84 is and how cool it is. You have 84 people in a polonium satellite metals company. But a few things I'd like to talk about. One, where you see Element 84 going. And then two, some advice. So some things, some hiccups you've had, or maybe some successes you've had in your business next time, and some advice you could share with our listeners. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, business startups, or people who've been in business for years would love to hear from you about, hey, this is what we did right, or this is what we did wrong. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Tracey. Thank you guys for joining us for this first segment of my interview and meeting with Tracey Pilone, the CEO of Element 84, the satellite data company. When we come back next time, a deeper dive into where the company's going and Tracey's thoughts. Download us wherever you get your podcasts. Watch us on YouTube. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. That's all for today's episode of Black Letter. Thanks again for listening. Join us next time when we talk about more Black Letter issues in creative ways. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and check out our website at blackletterstudios.com.